Joining today for our PPP Loan Forgiveness webinar. I'm going to give a couple more minutes for all the participants to join in. Please let me know if you can hear me, see me, and if it is working good. I tried to go on the Facebook Live, but for some reason, I think I'm getting an error message. Taruna, is this something you can look in for me? I'm trying to post it on the Facebook event, but it's not working on my side. How is everyone doing today? Okay, let's give a couple more minutes for everyone to join in, and then we are going to start our presentation on this webinar. I just can't wait to see everyone in person. Hello, Betty, how are you? Great to see you. Okay, and let's get started with our presentation. Share my screen. Let me know if you can see the screen and if you can hear me well. Okay. Alrighty, everyone. So let's get started with our webinar. I think we gave a couple minutes for everyone to come in and warm up. So today we got a fully jam-packed agenda on PPP loan forgiveness. While I was preparing for the slides for this particular webinar, I'm like, there are so many things that we need to cover. I just had to break it down. I'm like, maybe we might have to come up and do a couple sessions, maybe series, PPP loan forgiveness, part 1, part 2, part 3, something like that. It's an overwhelming, things with the interim bills, one after another coming in, and the continuous guidance coming from the SBA. Plus, this whole situation is very, very evolving. So, I'm sorry. So, I would have to break it down in couple sessions. Now, as usual, for some housekeeping items before we move on to further, if you have any question, please look into the Q&A towards the bottom of your screen, depending on if you're joining from your computer or your cell phone. Post your questions to Q&A if you want your question to be answered by me. If you want to just notify me about something, post your comments in the chat option. I will monitor chat option as well as Q&A from time to time. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. I'm just going to go over the disclaimer. This session is educational in nature and should not be construed as tax advice and may not reflect any changes in the federal or state law subsequent to the presentation date. Before taking any action based on this information, we strongly encourage you to consult with a professional tax and accounting advisor about your specific situation. Because every client situation is unique, you can either reach out to us for further clarification or help, or seek a help of your own accountant whom you trust. There is another bill that was passed last night where, if any of you know, that an executive order was passed by Trump administration a few weeks ago about the deferral of payroll taxes. That we have received some more guidance on it as of yesterday. I'm not going to cover that in detail for today's webinar, but my team will reach out to you guys, all the participants, and send some newsletter or something, or maybe we can dive deeper on that guidance in our next webinar. It just came in last night, so it was too soon to change my presentation slides and everything. But just wanted to let you all know that there is more guidance on how to defer your payroll taxes if your business is really suffering and you need that, little bit of a boost. you do have an option to defer out those payroll taxes starting from 1st of September 2020 through December 31st, 2020. So about 4 months of payroll tax deferral option is available. A little bit about our team. The KB team, we have 30 years of combined experience, and we are a full service professional accounting firm here in Central Valley, Pennsylvania. But we have been serving clients throughout the United States. Thanks to the online technologies, we have been blessed to provide the year-round advisory services. We are tax savings experts and specialize in hospitality industry, liquor stores, real estate industry, small businesses, as well as professional service providers. I, with my team, you will hear reaching out to my elder sister, Taruna Kanani, as well as Jigna Patel, who is my younger sister, by the way, who will be moderating the chat as well as a question and answer from time to time. Together, we have been educating business owners through this webinar since March 16, 2020, helping them navigate through this pandemic and pandemic time and interpreting this tough to understand bills and laws. So how I got started about this? We have been doing taxes and accounting for years, but when the crisis hit, I knew that the business owners across the country are going to be absolutely crushed. Being the business coach and accountant, we have to do something to help business owners. It was very soon when we found out that March 13th, the lockdown has been declared. And I didn't even know what we were going to do and how we were going to do. Did not have any backup plan, had never done much of a YouTube video or this kind of an online presentation before in front of hundreds of people. And I just come up and we just announced March 16th is going to be our first webinar helping out business owners. I just figured everyone else will be as much as nervous, just like me. So we are here on a mission to help as many business owners as we can with the tax and financial guidance. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper in Paycheck Protection Program by the numbers. And before I go too much in detail on Paycheck Protection Program, I just want to launch one question related to PPP. And I would really appreciate if all of you can take a few seconds to vote on it. I'm curious, how many jobs were you able to retain as a result of PPP funding? The whole purpose behind giving this PPP loan was to keep your employees on the payroll or to rehire them as quickly as possible. So I'm just kind of curious to know, did this PPP loans help you guys at all to maintain the jobs, with your team, or to continue paying yourself the payroll, the whole purpose for which this was designed? So as many of you all know, I'm not going to go into too much of detail, technical terms of the PPP, but I'm just going over the high level. Most of you have attended our previous webinar. I do see some new names here today, but I'm just assuming if you are attending this webinar, you do know some basic criteria about the PPP. If not, do let me know in the comment section, and I would go over much detail, all the basics from our prior webinar as well. So altogether, as of August 8th, about 5.2 million of the PPP loan has been disbursed. The total loan amount was, 5.25 billion altogether. All the 5.2 million applications combined, SBA had disbursed about $525 billion. Average loan size was about $100,000 here and there. And finally, as we all know, the Paycheck Protection Program is closed as of August 8, 2020. Now, just a little bit of breakdown by the loan sizes. If you see here, about 68.6% of the PPP loan given were below $50,000, which is the lowest amount compared to other two. 81% close to 82% received a PPP loan below $100,000, I would say $50,000 to $100,000, and about 87% of the business owners received PPP loan below $150,000, which is $100,000 to $150,000. And we have 0.6% of the business owners receiving $2 million or above in PPP loan. Per the CARES Act, you could get up to $10 million in PPP loan. And many business owners did receive 2 million or above or somewhere that range in PPP loan, and then were scrutinized, and many of them came back and returned that money. So business owners like you and me can get the advantage of it. But you know, here's some statistics I just thought would be interesting to look at it. So what is actually the PPP loan terms? I know this have changed many times with the CARES Act, and then the Flexibility Act, and then the interim bills and stuff like that. So just want to go over a quick summary of the final PPP loan terms as it stands today. The loan forgiveness, you could get either all or a portion of the loan may be eligible for forgiveness, which has to be 60% payroll related expenses and 40% non-payroll related expenses. Now, when it comes to the payroll related expenses versus non-payroll, I'm going to cover in detail, you know, how do we differentiate and what is included in both the categories. The payment deferment, it could include principal, your interest and fees deferred until the SBA remits forgiveness funds to the lender, but no later than 10 months after the end of the forgiveness covered period. So you get about from the date you receive the loan until you get the forgiveness, you don't have to make any payment towards your PPP loan money. You get that much of deferral. Now, you have to apply for the PPP loan forgiveness at least at least after your cover period is ended or before 31st December 2020, but no later than 10 months after the end of the forgiveness covered period. The maturity date of the loan and terms are 5 years for loans approved before June 5th or after. 5 years for loans approved June 5th or after. And if your loan was approved before June 5th, you get 2 years of recovery period. But from case to case, depending on the lender, they might allow you to pay 5 years of the approval period as well. With the either of the term, the interest rate is going to be again 1%. The loan disbursement, lender must make a one-time full disbursement of the loan within the 10 calendar days of loan approval when loan receives a SBA loan number. So the moment you have the SBA trust number, bankers are required to fund the loan within 10 business days. I know many lenders were not, doing that for one or the other reason, but that was a requirement of the SBA. There is no collateral or guarantee required, and no fees are required to be charged by the applicant or borrower because SBA has given, annual servicing fees to the lenders on behalf of the borrower. Covered expenses for the PPP forgiveness. So what are the covered expenses? It includes your payroll cost. Expenses qualifying as payroll costs are detailed in the following slides. Healthcare benefits, if that is something you provide to all the employees as part of the compensation package. Mortgage interest payments, mortgage interest on your business mortgage only, not on residential mortgage. Remember, I know many people have been calling me and asking, is a residential mortgage covered? I'm sorry, it's not. Business rent payments again, other interest payments, and the utility payments. When we call rent payments, it also includes the equipment lease or rent payments as well. So what are the eligible payroll cost versus ineligible payroll cost? This is something which is what most confusing for many business owner is. So the eligible payroll costs are employee compensation up to $100,000 per employee. So if you have an employee who is in executive position in your business and that employee is getting paid more than $100,000 in terms of salary throughout the year, that is considered as anything more than $100,000 is ineligible. Up to $100,000 is eligible. Now, when you are going with the 8 weeks recovery period or 24 weeks recovery period, you have to calculate the prorated compensation, keeping in mind $100,000 threshold, depending on 8 week or 24 weeks. The payment for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave are covered as eligible payroll cost. However, the sick leaves related to the COVID-19 quarantine or COVID-19 related recovery is not covered as eligible payroll cost. Allowance for dismissal or separation is covered. Group healthcare benefits, including insurance premiums, are also covered. And any retirement benefits, which are being paid as part of the compensation package, are covered. Statement of state or local tax assessed on employee compensation is covered as well. I think, Taruna, I just realized we have made a mistake here. This slide is exact replica of this. I'm sorry for that error on our side, but this tells that we are just a normal human beings, just like you all. So ineligible payroll costs are, any compensation more than $100,000 to an employee, sick leaves related to the, COVID-19 quarantine, or any family member of the employee being quarantined and your employee has to take days off, and you are paying for those days, that is not counted as part of the vacation, family, or sick leave here. If you have an employee who is staying home because kids are home and kids are homeschooling and they cannot work on a remote basis, on cloud, that cost is not covered either. There are other benefits under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which can be used to pay towards that, those expenses. Now, as long as you as an employer are providing group healthcare benefits to all the employees, that is covered. But if you are just providing healthcare benefits to one and not all the employees, that may not be covered as part of the PPP payroll cost, unless all the other employees, they just have the waiver out of it and they don't want to participate in the health insurance because your health insurance is pricey as an employer versus they getting themselves. Qualifying payroll cost. Now, when it comes to the C corporation versus S corporation, partnerships and LLCs, single member LLCs, sole proprietor, self-employed, the definition of payroll cost and what is covered, what not covered changes. So for the C Corp and S Corp owners who received W-2 wages should be included as payroll cost up to $100,000 limit. It is presumed that shareholder distributions are not to be included in payroll cost, subject to the owner-employee compensation limits if they own 5% or more of the company stock. I was just talking to one of the prospects a few days ago, and they happened to receive a PPP loan of $15,000. It was an S corporation, only 2 members, 50-50 partners in the S corp. And I was just looking at distributions, and we were just talking. Your distribution seems to be higher this year compared to last year. So when I look at the financial statements, I always like to compare, January through June of this year versus January through June of last year numbers. And they're like, okay, we received $15,000 of PPP loan. So we split 50-50% and wrote a check, distribution check, PPP distributions. I'm like, oh my gosh, you cannot do this because this is in complete violation of the CARES Act. And there are severe penalties for cutting the checks as a PPP distribution. It has to be paid as a payroll, especially for the S Corp owners. Partnerships and LLCs. Self-employment income of general active partners up to $100,000 is the limit. Again, Remember, it is general active partners in case of the partnerships. Oops. Now, if it is a single member LLC, sole proprietor, self-employed, someone who is filing as a Schedule C, the self-employed payroll cost for the loan calculation purposes is limited to $100,000 for 2019 Schedule C net profits, okay? Net profit is different than your gross revenue. Whatever your gross revenue minus all your expenses, whatever is your net profit, up to $100,000, you can get as a PPP loan, and that's how much can be, on a prorated basis can be considered for forgiveness purposes. Now, our team have been developing lots of tools to track the PPP loan forgiveness, and this is just one of the excerpts from our tools that we have developed. Qualifying non-payroll cost. Now, what are non-payroll costs for the PPP loan? One of the non-payroll costs, as many of you all know, is the rent and home office consideration. Sublease considerations. Rent paid cannot include for cost any areas that are subleased out based on the amount of subleased income. Mortgage interest paid must be prorated to only include the percentage share of the fair net value of the space that is not leased out to the other businesses. And utility payment should be prorated as well. So say, for example, you are a business owner, or, you are a business owner who owns the whole building, which has a couple of offices in that particular small building, which you are renting out to the other business owners. And you are renting yourself only one of the office in that particular building. Now, if your business is paying rent to that particular entity, which is a holding company, you can only take that much of a portion where the office your business is occupying as your rent for the PPP loan, not all the rent that the other lessees are paying to yourself. Home office expenses can be included if they were deductible on the borrower's 2019 tax filing. So this is especially helpful for the Schedule C or sole proprietors. If you had the home office expenses deducted for 2019 taxes, it could be deducted again for 2020 taxes. If the rent is paid to a related party, the amount of rent subject to forgiveness is limited to the amount of mortgage interest incurred and owed during that same period. So when it comes to the rent, you have to have the expenses incurred and owed during that same period. It doesn't matter if the June rent is paid in July or June rent is paid in April, 1 month before. As long as your covered period is June, that particular month rent or the mortgage interest will be covered. Leases renewed of leases in place before February 15, 2020 is counted again. When it comes to the utility expenses, it will be your utility, water, sewer, telephone, cable, internet. All of those expenses will be covered as part of your utility. If you have any transportation expenses, those expenses might be covered as well. The loan forgiveness reduction. In many cases, your loan forgiveness could be reduced if an employer offers employment to employee who declines because employee wants to take advantage of the unemployment benefits, that $600 extra that everyone was getting through the state, through the federal unemployment, and they ended up making more versus what you as an employer will be paying to those employees. Your loan forgiveness will be reduced unless you have documented that you requested employee to stop the unemployment and you required that employee to come back to the to the job as of particular date, and employee was non-responsive or whatever. You have to have the documentation in place that you made good faith effort to notify the employee and you invited that employee back to work. If it is a seasoned employee, especially for someone like construction people or someone like hoteliers, during the months of summer, you have full occupancy and you have full staff on board, versus during the winter months, you have less staff on board as well as less occupancy. So if you are someone who are seasoned employers, then in your particular case, they will look at the FTE requirement from the point of view of last year, same month, how many employees headcount you had, versus this year, same month, how many employees headcount you have. And your loan forgiveness could be reduced based on that. FTE reduction exception, if the employee made over 100K and you are reducing their pay a little bit, so that they are, not above 100K, that would not affect your PPP loan forgiveness. Any decreases in wages by more than 25% of the salary or hourly wages of an employee would affect the loan forgiveness by that amount. So in a nutshell, if I would look at, you have to maintain the same employee headcount, at the same time, same employee pay rate, whether it is a salaried employee or hourly wages. So you have to maintain both of those two things, or that would affect your loan forgiveness by that much amount. Now, there is a lot of things go into how will you respond to COVID-19, whether in denial, in panic, or with a proper plan, and plan out how you would apply for the forgiveness. At the same time, how to make sure you're compliant with the CARES Act, as well as all the interim bills passed by the SBA and Treasury. This is one of the charts which I must have shared a couple of times with you all, and I always like to come back again and again on this one. This is one of the very good information I think is helpful for all the business owners. And I go back and track here time to time, September 2020, here we are, and we have been tracking this chart since March 2020. So we were expecting, wave one returns to work early June, that came back to normal. I think COVID cases are a little bit okay and stabilized a little bit right now. We hear about the potential vaccines being discovered, but I have not heard anything at all if any potential vaccines are available to anyone. But hopefully, if it is, we have a successful vaccine available, very soon it is going to be made available to the healthcare workers. They are on the first in the line to get the vaccines first. And we are expecting another potential second wave of infections again from November 2020 through February 2020. The whole reason why I'm bringing this chart here is you as a business owner need to look at from the long-term picture view. This is not the situation that is going to be, that's going to end in next few months. It's going to take at least a good amount of a year or year and a half. What we have seen so far is, nothing compared to what is supposed to come in next few months, because everyone was surviving so far based on the savings reserves, and the cash was infused by the government so far. Day by day, people's savings are getting reduced. At the same time, the cash at the Treasury and the government level are being depleted. So, more worse is about to come in next few days. So you need to have the plan for your business. How would you survive? Plan for all the employees who are relying on your business, whose families are running on your business. So I just like to bring it up again and again. Now, when it comes to the forgiveness, lots of documents are required for the forgiveness. And many of you who has attended my past webinars, you must have heard me saying, whether it is a PPP loan or EIDL loan, make sure you open a separate business bank account, deposit all the PPP loan money as well as the EIDL loan money in that separate account. You do not want to mix the PPP loan money as well as EIDL loan money into your main business bank account. And the whole reason why I recommend that, because when it comes to the forgiveness, it will make whole lot easier for you to provide all the supporting documents and everything, to request for the forgiveness, because you have a separate account and it maintains all the proper trail for you. So employment plus wages documentation verifying the number of employees on payroll and their pay rates, including IRS payroll tax filings, state income, payroll, and unemployment filing. Everything is required as part of the PPP loan forgiveness. One thing to know, that even though you get 100% forgiveness for the payroll cost, the payroll taxes, which is the employer's portion of the payroll taxes, are not covered cost as part of the PPP loan forgiveness process. So your employer share of Social Security, Medicare, as well as the unemployment taxes is not covered as part of the PPP loan forgiveness process. So every time you cut the paycheck, make sure you are, transferring from your PPP loan account the gross payroll amount, including of employee share of payroll taxes as well as net pay. That is how much you should be, counting towards the forgiveness portion. All the receipts plus invoices, documentation verifying payments on mortgage interest, other interest payments, rent, and utilities. Utilities, again, it includes electricity, gas, water, transportation, and telephone plus internet access. Official certification. Certification from an organization representative that can verify that all documentation is true and in accordance with the PPP guidelines. This is a big deal, guys. You as a business owner are certifying here that all the information that you are giving is in good faith and all the correct information. Certifying wrong on the PPP forgiveness application could cause even criminal charges and civil penalties and all. So this is very serious and most people think about it. Besides that, there are many more documentation and everything is required. So on top of that, you as an employer are required to monitor the loan forgiveness test, which is full-time equivalent employees and wages test, which I was saying earlier in my previous slides. If you are a seasonal employer, say for example, and you had 20 employees in last summer, June through July, versus only 10 employees March and April this year, and maybe 15 employees June and July because you don't have full occupancy, it is your responsibility to compare and notify the bank and put it on your application how many headcounts you have lost this year, how many headcounts you have less this year compared to last year. At the same time, if you're reducing anyone's wages or because your business is not working at the 100% capacity, you don't need that many staff on duty. You're reducing the wages or not calling in the part-time employees. It is your responsibility as an employer who received the PPP loan to notify to the lender. The forgiveness documentation submission to the lender, compliance with the regulations. I know it is kind of overwhelming with how many interim bills are being passed, but again, the responsibility is imposed on the employers, the business owners, to make sure that you are being compliant with the regulations. And I definitely do recommend to have the strategic planning, how you are going to calculate and how you are going to organize all the documentation for the forgiveness process. At the same time, short-term cash flow planning and tax planning, because by whatever amount your PPP loan is forgiven, you will lose your deductions in the business up to that amount 100%. So if you receive the PPP loan of $50,000, out of which $45,000 is forgiven and $5,000 was not forgiven, that $45,000 worth of expenses will not be available to take as deduction in your taxes, if that makes sense. Now, what would the PPP loan forgiveness general process look like? Let me know if you want me to go in very, very detailed as to the PPP loan forgiveness. I might have to do one or two whole sessions just talking about the forgiveness application itself. Maybe 3-4 sessions it would take. But, I don't want to overwhelm everyone with too much of things that you just completely get stressed out. So in a nutshell, this is what it will look like. Business owner submits a loan forgiveness application to the lender. The lender has 60 days to issue a decision to the SBA. So the first decision is going to come through the lender. Then the SBA has 90 days to review and determine if the borrower is eligible for the forgiveness and for how much. So the second decision will be of the SBA. So the initial decision is of the lender, the second decision is of the SBA. Now the lender is responsible for notifying the borrower because SBA will notify the lender, lender has to notify the borrower. If only a portion of the loan is forgiven or if the forgiveness request is denied, any remaining balance must be repaid on or before the 2 or 5 year maturity of the loan term. So if you are someone who received a PPP loan before June 5th, you do have an option to go with the 2-year maturity period or 5-year maturity period, depending on your lender. If you are someone who received the loan after June 5th, you have to go with the 5-year loan period unless your lender gives you an option for a lesser term. Interest will continue to accrue during the whole deferment period. So interest is going to continue to accrue from the date you receive the loan through the date you are paying your loan back. So, in a nutshell, it could take up to 5 months to get the forgiveness of the loan approved. The goal is to have the meticulously correct and detailed application for forgiveness. You want to get this done as correctly and the best way possible because you want to make sure it is accurate from the beginning, else it might run into more time, more than 5 months, as SBA will be overwhelmed with the millions of PPP forgiveness applications. Now, for those of you who did receive the EIDL loans as well as the PPP loans, you will already know how tough it is to get hold of the SBA. And here the final decision is on the SBA. When it comes to the EIDL, even after a number of hours long wait, you can talk to the SBA. But when it comes to the PPP loan, it is just almost impossible to get hold of the SBA. So take your own time, and make sure that your loan application is correct. Make sure you have all the proper documentation ahead of time. So, you don't have to waste your important time going back and forth and not knowing whether this amount is going to be forgiven or not. Now, there is talks going on, it's still in the air. There are talks going on that any business owner who has received a PPP loan of less than $150,000 will receive automatic forgiveness. But it's been going on in the air since months. We have not heard any final bill being passed on that. It might pass, it might not pass, but it makes more sense passing that bill because the amount of time and resources that we all as a country and the economy will be wasting as part of this whole process kind of really outweighs, granting the automatic forgiveness. But even if the automatic forgiveness is granted, there will be, rules to it that, which would be, in case of PPP loan, from next 3 to 6 years, anytime SBA can come back and request for all the documentation from you as a proof. So whether you are given the automatic forgiveness or not, you will still have to maintain all the documentation. So why not start just now itself? Now, when can I apply for the forgiveness? You may submit the loan forgiveness application anytime after the loan proceeds have been used up or on or before the maturity date of the loan. And you can also apply at the end of the covered period if all of the loan proceeds for which the borrower is requesting forgiveness have been used. So say, for example, if the borrower does not apply for the loan, if the borrower requested for the PPP loan of $50,000 and is only requesting for forgiveness for $45,000, and you have used all of that $45,000, and there is no way you can use rest of the $5,000 remaining, you can absolutely go ahead and apply for the PPP loan forgiveness right away. So you do have a couple of options here, but you have to make sure that you apply for the loan forgiveness either at the maturity period, which is your 8 weeks or 24 weeks covered period, or before 31st of December 2020. But take as much of time as you need to prepare all the documentation so that you have the clean record and everything. Now, in the event, if the borrower does not apply for the loan forgiveness deferral period, does not apply for the loan forgiveness within the deferral period, and deferral period ends 10 months after the end of the borrower's loan forgiveness period. So if you do not apply for the loan forgiveness after the 24 weeks or 8 weeks covered period, you get up to 10 months to apply for the forgiveness. And after that, it's done. SBA will make final decision on their own. You do not get an option to apply for the loan forgiveness at all. So what kind of a loan forgiveness application to use? There are two application processes that have been released. One is 3508 easy application, and the other one is full form. Most business owners would qualify for the easy applications. There are some business owners who would not qualify, especially if you had employee who did not come back to work and all. But in order to qualify for the easy application, the borrower has to be who are self-employed and have no employees, or they have the employees but they did not get any PPP funds for the employees, or did not reduce the salary or hourly wages of any employees by more than 25%, and did not reduce the number of hours of their employees, or experienced reductions in business activity as a result of health directives related to COVID-19, and did not reduce the salaries or wages of their employees by more than 25%. So if you fall into one of these three categories, you are eligible to use for easy application. The easy application requires fewer calculations to be done and less documentation is needed for the eligible borrowers. Both applications gives borrowers the option of using either the original 8-week recovery period or 24-week cover period. Another option is to go to use the full application, which includes methods for calculating full-time equivalent employee reductions. If you are someone who are seasonal employer, or who has reduction in the employee headcounts or reduction in salary by more than 25%, you have to use a full application for the PPP loan forgiveness. It does require much more documentation than the easy application, but that's the only option available. Now, in a summary, make sure you have a strategic plan and you are actively monitoring it, you're tracking it, okay? Track the expenses carefully to facilitate a fast and no surprise accounting, because with the PPP loan, your accounting entries are changed as well, okay? Use the funds as they were intended to spend. Do not write yourself PPP distribution check for the S Corp owner, just the other person I was talking about earlier. It's likely a portion of the PPP loan will not be forgiven. And if it is not forgiven, still it's not a bad thing. You cannot get any loan at 1% interest rate. It's really a good option. You know? If you end up with unspent PPP funds, you have two options. Give the remaining amount back, all whatever $5,000, $10,000 you have available, give it back in one installment, or turn it into low interest loan. You might need, and you pay at 1% interest rate. And with the new bill that was passed on August 4, 2020 about the PPP loan, you as an employer are allowed to defer the payroll taxes through December 31st, 2020, and pay the balance of the payroll taxes deferred by December 31st, 2021, or by December 31st, 2022. So if you are the employer whose business is really suffering, you got the PPP loan, but it's still not sufficient, and you are at that stage where you have to defer your payroll taxes, you do not have to pay any portion of the payroll taxes through the end of this year, and you are given the extended amount of time to pay your payroll taxes in 2 installments. So 50% you pay by 31st December 2021, which is 1 year from 2020, and rest 50% you get about 2 years period of time to pay for your payroll taxes, which is also not bad because you're not being charged any taxes, penalty, or anything like that. So I think if your business is really suffering and this is the only option which is available to help you stay afloat during this time, I think this is not a bad option either. I'm going to cover some of the examples. I had received multiple questions as well as email inquiries on this kind of questions. So I just thought I would answer it here in this webinar and cover them in a one nutshell. So this particular example, I just wanted to illustrate here, how to calculate your covered period, and how to differentiate between paid or incurred. What are your paid expenses versus incurred expenses? So let's look at here. Borrower on a biweekly pay cycle received a PPP loan on April 20th, 2020, which is before June 5th, 2020. Okay. So this particular borrower has two options: either to elect for the covered period of 8 weeks or to elect a covered period of 24 weeks. Now, if this borrower elects to go with the covered period of 8 weeks, the PPP period will start on April 20, 2020, which is the same day PPP loan was received, and will end on June 14, 2020. Okay, so PPP covered period starts on April 20 through June 14, 2020. So any payroll expenses incurred, which means any amount for this borrower from April 20 to June 14, all of those payroll expenses will be covered. Whether, last payroll, as it says here, June 14, even if the pay date falls on June 19, it will be still counted as a covered payroll expenses. So your PPP loan period ends on June 14th, but your pay date is on Friday, which is June 19th. It will be still covered as part of the PPP loan forgiveness process. Now let's look at the 24 weeks. So with the 24 weeks covered period, the payroll covered period starts on April 20, 2020. It will end on October 4, 2020. Again, if the last payroll of that ends on October 4, 2020, that particular week is paid after that particular date. In this particular borrower's example, the pay date is October 9th. That particular payroll is going to be covered as part of the PPP loan forgiveness because the payroll expenses were incurred during the covered period. Okay, so if it is paid, that is also covered, but if it is incurred, that is also covered. Initially, there was confusion whether it is paid and incurred, which SBA gave more clarification in the interim bill passed on August 4th. So moving on to the next question, are non-payroll costs incurred prior to the covered period, but paid during the covered period eligible for loan forgiveness? I'm assuming, many people ask this question, and this is, very well possible. You had the payroll that, that was your pay period started before you received the PPP loan, and you are in between your pay period and you got the PPP loan at the same time, especially in case of rent. Many landlord does require rent to be paid on the first of the month, and you receive your PPP loan on April 20th. So you already paid for your April month of rent on April 1st, but now what to do? You paid it prior to the covered period. So absolutely, yes, these expenses are covered. The eligible business mortgage interest cost, eligible business rent or lease cost, and eligible business utility cost incurred to the covered period and paid during the covered period are eligible for loan forgiveness. Now, let's have a look at this example again. A borrower's 24-week covered period runs from April 20 to October 4th. On May 4th, the borrower receives its electricity bill for April month. The borrower pays its April electricity bill on May 8th. Although a portion of the electricity costs were incurred before the covered period, these electricity costs are eligible for the loan forgiveness because they were paid during the covered period. I know it is very, very confusing, but in a nutshell, yes, it is eligible for PPP loan forgiveness. Are non-payroll costs incurred during the covered period but paid after the covered period eligible for loan forgiveness? Yes, again, these are eligible as well. Whether it is a payroll related cost or non-payroll related cost, as long as it was incurred in the covered period, it is eligible for the PPP forgiveness. Can a current borrower apply for the forgiveness before 31st December 2020? I would say yes. If the borrower does not apply for the loan forgiveness, within the given time frame, then the SBA will make their own decision on the forgiveness amount. So I would say yes, you can apply for the forgiveness even before 31st December 2020. Even if you have not spent all your PPP loan money, yes, you can apply for the forgiveness even before that time. Are payroll costs that were incurred before the covered period but paid during the covered period eligible for loan forgiveness? Again, yes, this question was covered. How is the amount of owner compensation that is eligible for loan forgiveness determined? The amount of compensation of owners who work at their business that is eligible for forgiveness depends on the business type and whether the borrower is using 8-week covered period or 24-week covered period. In addition to that, there are specific caps described by the SBA. When it comes to the owner employees, the amount of loan forgiveness, you can get, the maximum amount that can be forgiven is $20,833 per individual in total across all the businesses in which he or she is an owner. So if you have more than one business and you are taking payroll from more than one business and got PPP loan from more than one business, you can only get up to $20,833 as a loan forgiveness. So at this point, I think I'm going to go ahead and cover the questions posted in the chat box. I know there must be a lot of things circling around your head. I know it is tough to wrap up head around this tough guidelines. So let's go ahead and look at the questions. And before I end that, before I go through the questions, I want to end this poll, which I completely forgot about. and we'll share results with all of you. So you get to see that about 79% of the people were able to retain and maintain the jobs as a result of the PPP fundings. And 21% were able to maintain jobs for 11 to 25 employees. So this is very helpful. I'm glad that this PPP initiative was helpful for you all with maintaining your headcount ratio as well as helping your business survive. So taking on the first question, does the EIDL or EIDL advance affect the PPP loan forgiveness? Yes, absolutely does. When you have received the PPP loan, at the same time you have received the EIDL advance, your EIDL advance shifts the bucket from the EIDL and goes to the PPP. Okay, stay with me here. It goes from the EIDL and it goes to the PPP. If your PPP loan was $10,000, say for example, and your EIDL advance was only $2,000, you can only get PPP forgiveness of $10,000 and rest $2,000 you have to pay back in 2 or 5 years at 1% interest rate. So if you have received the EIDL advance as well as a PPP loan money, you cannot get the EIDL advance as forgiven, but that has to be paid back to the SBA at 1% interest rate, if that makes sense. But that was a very good question. The next question, can you deduct the repayment of loans, whether PPP or SBA, from the business? Yes and no. Repayment of loan, as far as it covers the interest expense of the loan for the business, yes, that can be deducted as part of the PPP loan. The principal amount of the loan cannot be deducted out of the PPP loan. So, the interest portion is deductible, the principal is not, but it has to be business related loan. And I do see a couple more questions here. What about the PPP funds deposited into business bank account? Based on your comment, we will just have to go through more paperwork. Is that right? Absolutely right. So think about it. Your business revenue is coming in your business checking account, okay? You got your PPP loan in the same business checking account as well. And every day you keep on adding more and more business revenue in that same particular account. Now, when it comes to the PPP loan forgiveness or EIDL, how and where can you differentiate that the particular payroll you paid is out of your PPP loan money or your business revenue money or your EIDL loan money or your EIDL grant money? No way, right? So what I would recommend, you should have one business checking account, one PPP loan plus EIDL grant account combined together, and third, just the EIDL loan account. The PPP loan and EIDL advance have the separate reporting requirement. Statute of limitation on those particular loan is 3 years. The EIDL loan has a separate reporting requirements, have a separate restrictions on how you can spend that money. And the statute of limitation on that particular loan is 6 years. So you're required to maintain the PPP loan documents for at least next 3 years, and you can, SBA can do inquiry at any time for next 3 years. In the EIDL, you have to maintain for 6 years, and you can be audited or requested documentation anytime in next 6 years. Now, when you separate out this account, you are only giving out copies of the checks as well as your bank statements and everything only for the limited set of transactions, and not for the whole list of your business transactions. Because in your business, even if your business is suffering through the pandemic, you still have a lot of expenses which are not allowed as part of the PPP loan or as part of the EIDL. You don't want to give out all of those expenses or all the copies of the checks and go through that whole bunch of paperwork. It's kind of a tedious job. So it's best you deposit it in a separate account, create a proper paper trail from that particular account for the eligible expenses. If by mistake you have a couple extra expenses, you just have to explain for a couple of them and done. You know, it's easy for you, easy for the banker, easy for the SBA, everyone. So, you know, these are all good questions. I hope I covered all the questions. And we do offer the complimentary disaster strategy. If your business needs, you know, disaster strategy, we do guide you with the cash flow forecasting, budgeting, what kind of fundings to take care of, you know, after you got the funding, how to maintain the proper records and be compliant, the tax planning strategy and the forgiveness planning strategies. As part of our webinar group, we do offer these complimentary sessions to you. And if you're looking to schedule up a session, Taruna can post a link into the comment section or send you out as an email. Hopefully this session was helpful for you all and you guys learned something new. And most likely we will come up, you know, in the next few webinars. Let me just launch my next polling question. I'm so sorry, I forgot to launch my next polling question here. What other topics would you like us to cover on our next webinar? Please forgive, the webinar date is written wrong on there. It's not July 9th. It's going to be actually September 22nd. We forgot to change the date in there. So just forgive us that. Our next webinar is going to be on September 22nd at 3 p.m. We will announce the topic in next few days. And again, if you know any business owners who can benefit from these sessions, feel free to invite them. Together, we can you know, help and save someone else's business. At the same time, together, we can help other families run and survive through this pandemic time. Yeah, once again, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. I know we have covered a lot of information, and I hope it was informative and helpful to you all. And I'm just going to give a couple more minutes for everyone to answer these questions. And let's end the poll here. And I still see people voting in. Okay, so I know I'm running late for my next meeting, and let's see. I have 2 people raising hands. Okay, I hope I'm pronouncing this name right, Mariana. And Mr. Sadiq, if you have question, please post it in the comment section. There are certain limitations on the Zoom meeting side. Even if you raise hands, I cannot, you know, unmute you or, you know, ask you a question that way. But if you post a question here, I would be sure to answer that question. And if you are gone by now, I think you are still here. But feel free to email me question if you have, and you know, I will make sure to respond to those questions in the email. I hope to see you all on September 22nd at 3 p.m. Let me know if you have any questions. Until then, stay safe, and hopefully we all can help other businesses stay positive and survive through this tough time. Alrighty, thank you, bye.